Welcome, everyone. This is MLB Tonight. Brian Kenny here with Ron Darling and Mark Feinsand. Yes, there's baseball news today. We'll talk about a Marlins trade and also landmark free agent deals. We go back a ways. We can go back to these landmark deals and putting the Carlos Correa saga in perspective, because that was crazy, right? I'm not losing my mind. That is one of the crazier things we've seen in the history of free agency, right?
Well, not only was it crazy in the way that it evolved, but how long it took to really have it finally finish up. I think that was the uniqueness of that deal.
We're going to bring up Catfish Hunter and Wayne Garland.
Oh,
Mark,
nice.
You'd be excited.
We've seen crazy. This was bonkers. So because we've seen surprising. This was a whole other level in terms of a guy signing agreeing to three nine-figure deals with 3 different teams over the course of 4 weeks.
It made me think that no way do you show your medicals here when you're trying to negotiate a new contract.
It's like when you're selling a house and you're like, can you do an inspection? No. Waive the inspection.
Exactly.
That's it. All right, top of the news, though. The Dodgers releasing Trevor Bauer. They'd already DFA'd their former starting pitcher. They owe him $22.5 million. He can't be signed by another club now. His suspension, again, he was facing sexual assault charges. His suspension was originally 324 games. It was reduced to 194 games by an independent arbitrator. So, again, he was suspended 2 years, but he won't be pitching for the Dodgers. He only pitched 107 innings for L.A., had a 2.59 ERA. This guy was the Cy Young Award winner in 2020. Now it comes down to, Mark, start with you. What is the appetite out there among teams for Trevor Bauer?
Well, for a pitcher of this caliber, you now look at any team can sign him for the minimum, right, $720,000 or so. Dodgers are going to pay the rest of his salary. The question becomes, do they want to bring in a guy who had these charges against him? There's going to be some, potential PR backlash, and teams have to decide whether the plus on the field is worth the potential noise off the field.
Right. Again, no criminal charges were filed against him, but he faced allegations. Again, he has fought them, but he faced these suspensions officially from Major League Baseball. So there's a lot of ramifications for all of this.
Well, there are, but it's a small fraternity when you're talking about the 30 teams. If you talk about his physical ability, there's 10 to 12 teams that he would be their #1 starter if they signed him tomorrow. All 30 teams would be better. I'm talking about on the field if Trevor Bauer was part of their roster. The problem is the experiment or experience of Trevor Bauer in Los Angeles. Only 17 starts, a PR nightmare, and I don't think. So with that said, what he can provide with the team with his physical gifts, I don't think he's going to pitch this year.
Well, yeah, it comes down to, you don't think so? Okay.
No.
What are you hearing, Mark? What's the wind out there?
There isn't much. Everybody's been pretty quiet on this. I think teams that might be considering it are probably discussing it internally and, sort of taking the temperature of their clubhouses. And but there hasn't been much. I mean, obviously the Dodgers had a week to try to trade him. That didn't happen. So now it's up to any club who wants to roll the dice and bring him in. Like Ron said, the physical talent is unquestioned. Nobody questions that he would help all 30 teams in their rotation, but you have to weigh the pros and cons.
Right, and the Dodgers are a team in a state of flux. Again, this is a club that won 111 games last year, and they're averaging about 107, 108 wins a year. They're a tremendous ball club, but they're changing some things out there. Miguel Rojas traded to the Dodgers today from the Marlins for a prospect, Jacob Amaya, former shortstop prospect. He's number 15 prospect in the system for the Marlins. Again, he goes up from the Dodgers. He goes to the Marlins. Rojas, last 2 years, only an 83 OPS plus, but the man can field. Last year, defensive runs saved, plus 15. That's a serious number. If you're at shortstop and you get a 0, your league average, you're just fine. His DRS, you see there, plus 15, outs above average. The metrics align. That's the StatCast defensive metric, plus 10. So this guy, I know he's going, I think, age 34 season, but this guy, very valuable player in the field.
I've watched him play a lot of games. He modeled his game after Martin Prado, a guy that was a winning player, could play, was a versatile player, and Rojas has been that as well. But at shortstop, where he's been one of the better players for the Marlins on the field, everyday player, and he's also a guy that you have to watch him play an entire season. You're not going to come to the ballpark and watch Rojas play and go, boy, he's one of the best players on the field. That's not going to happen. But over the course of time, he's one of those players that seems to do something to help your team win every night. Now, he's been on a team that has struggled to win, so it hasn't shown up as much. But, boy, put him on a ball club, like you said, that won 111 games last year. I don't know what they're going to do at shortstop. There's been talk of Lux, talk of Rojas, or talk of others, but he's always a plus to me on any ball club.
At worst, a utility glove, and a very good one, and at a premium defensive position.
Correct. He gives them options, which a team like the Dodgers loves options. He can play shortstop. He can be that utility guy. You can put Lux at short, maybe Chris Taylor at second, Max Muncy at third. They've got, the Dodgers like those guys who have multiple positional versatility. He's another one of those guys, and he will help them navigate their way around the infield. Maybe they start Lux at short. If it doesn't work out, they move him back to second. They put Rojas at short. They have some options, and I think that's what this trade was all about.
Look, we've gotten used to the Dodgers being really as far as from the executive point of view, they're the standard by which all clubs are measured. They have everything going on. But take a look at the additions and subtractions for this club this year. They've lost a good part of their club. Again, we've gotten used to, through the years that, Justin Turner has been there. But you see, Justin Turner is gone. Cody Bellinger, who is MVP, top MVP candidate. Trey Turner is gone. Now, even Chris Martin, Craig Kimbrell, David Price, who didn't do an awful lot for them, but Tyler Anderson did. They did bring back Clayton Kershaw. You see who else they brought in. Look, Jason Hayward not expected to do an awful lot. Maybe J.D. Martinez still with a bat. Mark, where are you on the Dodgers and what they've done this year and who they've lost?
The thing that stands out to me most looking at that list, so, they lost Tyler Anderson. They brought in Syndergaard. Maybe they think there's a bounce back there. Okay, fine. That's good. You lost Trey Turner. There's nobody on the left side of that list that does what Trey Turner does. There's not many people in baseball that do what Trey Turner does. Losing a player of that caliber and not being able to replace him, that's a big hole in the lineup. I mean, this lineup has some big names, right, with Freeman and Betts, but you look at the bottom of that lineup, it's not quite as imposing as it used to be. Cody Bellinger fell off a cliff. He's going to try to bounce back and restart his career with the Cubs and figure out what went wrong the last few years in L.A., but all of a sudden, the Dodgers lineup looks a little more top-heavy than it has in recent years. Right. And you just wonder if the bottom of that lineup is going to be able to produce. They were 9 deep for the last 5, 7, 10 years, and that's not the case right now.
First, their shortstop position. They went from Corey Seager to Trey Turner, and now maybe Miguel Rojas. That is certainly a drop-off from 2 superstar players. You look at their rotation. The last 2 seasons, Clayton has started 22 games in both 21 and 22. So you expect kind of that's what you're going to get for him as well. Walker Buehler is probably not going to be back till the end of the year, but you're still showing lots of talent. Julio Urias, who only just wins every time he goes on the field. Tony Gonsolin, who had a career year last year. And Dustin May is going to be back for an entire year. But I'm with Mark, I'm with you, BK, that they're missing some pieces that we would spend all winter expounding on how they're going to win 105 plus. But now they seem a little short, especially in the outfield. Mookie, of course, is such a star. But who are the other outfielders that are going to fill in out there? Is it Trace Thompson? Is it Trace Thompson who started out so hot for the Dodgers, or Trace who finished kind of slower? It's going to be interesting to see.
There were only a few years ago, maybe it was only 2 years ago, that it seemed like between Taylor and Muncy and Bellinger, they're just mixing and matching, platooning guys who could make an all-star team.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why when you look at them now, they don't have that same – they have some guys who can mix and match, but not produce the way that Muncy and Taylor and Bellinger were doing 2-3 years ago. The Bellinger going from an MVP to a guy who got non-tendered is a fascinating development. Because 3 years ago, he wins the MVP, and you're saying, well, this might be the next great lifelong Dodger, and then it just disappeared. And it's, when you have a guy who you're counting on to that extent, and then all of a sudden you can't count on him anymore, and then poof, he's gone. How do you replace that?
You said they might be top-heavy, but top-heavy might be enough when it's Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith and others.
Yeah, they could lose 10 wins, and so they'll only win 100, 101 games, that sort of thing. Yeah, Dodgers still in pretty good shape, but it's a good point. They're a different ball club right now. Meantime, from the Marlins' point of view, who plays shortstop with Rojas out? They've got one player emerging. They just made a trade for another. Here's General Manager Kim Ng.
At this point, I don't feel ready to necessarily anoint anybody with that. I still think that there's a lot of off season left to be had, and we've still got to go and keep exploring how to make the club better. So not really willing to commit on that at this point.
Well, I guess there's no reason to yet, Ronnie, but the player that's emerging, that's Jazz Chisholm. Didn't play shortstop last year, but he played 46 games or 37 games at shortstop 2 years ago and played it predominantly in the minor leagues, Mark. Right? How many games in the minors was he playing?
310 of his 360 games in the minors were at shortstop.
Coming up as a shortstop, basically. But Gene Segura, who's not on this list, was a shortstop for the Phillies only in 2019. They have Segura as well. What do you think, Ronnie?
Well, Joey Wendell, he can fill in anywhere defensively. He's such a good defensive player, but I don't see him as your main shortstop. John Birdie is another guy. His versatility, outfield and infield, is part of his great charm with that ball club. So if you identify, if you're Kim Ng and you identify that Jazz Chisholm, you're going to get the most offensively out of this talented athletic player by playing second base, then you got to go out and get a shortstop. But if you feel as though he'll be more comfortable at a position that Mark said he started predominantly in the minor leagues, then you stick him at short. That's where I think the player wants to play, and maybe that's where he maxes out as far as showing his talent.
Right, you maximize the value of the guy. You put him at shortstop until he can't play that position. It's just a matter of can he field at that position. You need to field there. You can be exposed if you can't field at that spot.
I mean, he played a quarter of the season there last year. Obviously, the Marlins know what he can do there. So if they think he can handle the position, it would seem like a natural fit. Move him over to short. Segura's been playing second base in Philly. Move him to second. Maybe Wendell goes to third. The other thing is, we've heard all winter, their starting pitchers, not named Sandy Alcantara, are potentially on the trade block. Maybe they make a trade. They're looking to bring in an impact bat. Maybe there's a third baseman out there that they can get for Pablo Lopez, and they add it back to the infield that way. So there are options. I don't think there's any reason for Kim Ng to make any such proclamations on January 12th, where 4 or 5 weeks in spring training starting. We're 2.5 months from the season starting. There's time.
The shifting is going to be mitigated because of the new rules, but they're still going to shift. But it will reveal the athleticism of some infielders will really come into play.
Second baseman is going to be there at least largely by himself.
That's right.
Used to have guys all around. Now he's by himself. How far are the Marlins away from maybe making a dent? Because the National League, Ronnie, you watch it very closely,
yes,
calling Mets games. There's haves and have-nots. But there's room there to challenge. We'll talk about this later, but room to challenge for that 5 and 6 spot, the seeds in the playoffs. How far away are the Marlins?
Well, you know, the competition in that division is awfully tough, right, with the Phillies, Braves, and the Mets. They've always had this young pitching, and now the addition of Johnny Cueto is going to help school some of those young pitchers. But I think more importantly, what happened is Kim Ng last year, I think she made a real positive step in going out and getting Avisail Garcia, going out and getting Jorge Soler, but they did not have good years. In fact, Garcia's year was just not the kind of year you would expect from him. So those parts that were not or did not deliver last year, you're looking for them to rebound, but it still is with that ball club. They could use a couple more bats, and how you find those, I don't know.
Yeah, my philosophy, Mark, is usually you're in or you're out. They seem to be a little bit in between. Do they make that push to get in, or do they not?
I think they got a taste of it in 2020 when they got to the postseason in the shortened season, and I think the push is there. They want to get back to it. They know that you've got the Mets, you've got the Braves, you've got the Phillies. That's a tough division, but like Ronnie said, the rotation is pretty good. Even if you trade a Pablo Lopez, you've got the ace. You've got the Cy Young winner. Most teams don't have that number one lockdown starter at the top of their rotation. So you can build around that in your pitching staff. You've got some young, talented guys in Jazz Chisholm. And if you can use that pitching depth to bring in another impact bat, I'm not saying they're going to challenge for the NL East, but I think they'll be in that mix to potentially get a wild card. And if they're close in the summer, maybe they make a trade. There are some prospects there.
You know, BK, what they're suffering from now is that they traded the talented trio of outfielders, an MVP and Stanton in right field, Yelich, who had some of his best years in Milwaukee from 17 to 19, of course, Ozuna. Who they got back is a passel of talented, young, prospect, everyday players. They didn't become those kind of players that they thought difference makers. So that's why they have to pivot and maybe try to find them in free agency.
Right. When we come back here on MLB Tonight, we'll take a look at teams that one of the teams like most talked about this offseason, as in what other Red